Before we get started in this lesson, I'm going to ask you to go into your working folder if you want to follow along. Hope you do. And open up Divide Trim, Merge Crop, and Outline Minus Back. Now, you've probably heard me say earlier in this lesson series that I really do like the Pathfinder tools, and they really are powerful. They haven't really appreciably changed, say, in the last couple of versions, but they are very powerful because they help you take simple shapes and make them more complicated. So let's go up to the word window on the pull-down menu and go down to Pathfinder right here. I'll go ahead and tuck it up over here so we can keep an eye on it. If I can grab it, there we go. Sometimes I can't seem to grab things like I want to. Pathfinder has two rows. You have shape modes and we have pathfinders down here. Now they, to me, are just so important that we're devoting 2 lessons to this one panel. We're going to start with these down here in this lesson and then go into these in the next lesson. And on and off in this particular title, we'll be using them on and off to do things. They're fun to work with. Now the first 2 were on Divide and Trim up here, and that is Divide, and that's Trim right here. Let me do this too. Let me make this area right here a little bit bigger so we can see that better. Okay. Let me pick up my regular selection tool and come over here and just prove a point that these are separate pieces. No magic going on here. Let me undo that. That's actually my favorite key, undo. I've got them all kind of like on top of each other, yellow ones on top, blue ones underneath. Now I'm going to select them all. What does Divide do? Well, what Divide does is it looks at one object, and they have to be objects and not, say, photographs or raster, obviously. But it looks at one object, and it looks at an object that's underneath it, no matter how far down underneath it it is, and if they intersect, it cuts it. It uses one object to cut another one. So if we have them all selected, and I come over here and click Divide, it doesn't really look like much happened, but let me show you exactly what did happen. Now, they are in a group by default, so the easiest way to get to them without ungrouping them would be the Direct Selection tool. And I come over here, and as you can see, they are now individual pieces. So let me do this. Let me put those back. I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to hold the Shift key down, and I'm going to click on every other one of these. My sister, when she was younger, used to make these pot holders in Girl Scouts in the United States, and they were made out of wool, whatever they were, and she'd give them to my mother. They never worked that well, but Mom, appreciated the thought. What I'm doing here is creating, or trying to create, a weave after doing a divide. I'll just do these 3 rows. You'll get the idea. So I have those pieces. They're now separate pieces because the divide selected. If I make sure I've got fill, which I do, and come over here and choose the color that the background ones were, I begin to create the illusion of a weave. Now, what I love about the human mind here in its attempt to try to show me something 3-dimensional in an obviously flat place is it almost begins to look like these are slightly bent. I mean, they're not. We know they're not. But our brains and our minds are going, oh, okay, that's on top of that, and there must be thickness, therefore it must be bent. I will show it to him as being that way. The mind is an interesting area to get into. That's divide. Let's do it again. Let me move this area up. All I have here are circles. Circles on top of circles on top of circles. If I then come over here and select all of them and do a divide on them, again, I've got the Direct Selection tool. They become separate pieces. Divide's a nice one if you're just trying to cut things apart or do a weave. You could do like the Olympic, kind of like the 5 circles of the Olympics and have them woven in and out of each other. Divide's a nice one, very easy to understand. Select what you want, click the button. Now the second one over here is called, right here, is called Trim. Now this one's very easy to understand. I have an object on top of this object. This is the trimming object right here, and this is the object that will be trimmed because it's underneath. If I select both and come over here and click that button, doesn't look like it's changed until you move this one and it took a bite out of it. So the trim, again, like divide's pretty easy to figure out. If you have an object on top of another object, when you click trim, basically whatever is underneath that object is going to go away. Now, if you did a divide, let's do this. Let me undo that and get it back. So we're back to having the two objects. If we do a divide on that, it kind of looks similar, except the fact that you now actually have three pieces, because divide cuts wherever it finds an object on top or below another one. So that's trim and divide. Let's go into merge and crop, the next setup here. Merging. I've got two items here that are exactly the same except for the colors. So let me bring that over a little bit this way, and I don't know, let's make that a little bit bigger. Why not? It's a little bit too big. Let me bring that down. Okay, let's come over here and let's select these. Try that again, Andy. There we go. And here it is right here. Go ahead and click it. Merge. Now notice what happened. Everywhere one item intersected another, it cut it. Now you might be about to say to me, and you would be correct, isn't this kind of like the divide one? You're right, it is. But merge works a little bit differently. So we have the same set down here. One difference. The fill color of this one is the same as this one. And I left a stroke on. Merge doesn't work with stroke. It ignores it. But I left the stroke on just to prove that those are different items. If I come over here again and select these and do a merge, it welded them together. So merge actually works with fill color. If the colors are different, it's going to cut them very much like divide. But if the colors are the same, it will weld them into one piece. It's pretty interesting. The next one over, let's move over a little bit this way, is this one right here, and that is called crop. Now what crop does, let me show you on this one. What crop does is it works best with two items. The cropping item is the one underneath. This is the one that's on top. It's similar to what we did in the previous lesson with draw inside, because you can see this one as a triangle, and the circle is down here or underneath it. And if we click this button right here, you can see the only thing that's left basically is the part of the triangle that existed inside of the circle, kind of like draw inside. If you work with more than one shape, though, it doesn't work that well. So here I've got actually the same thing, and I added a circle. Now if I click that button again, you will notice what it did. It ignored the one in the middle and only worked with the top one and the bottom one. So when you're working with this option on cropping, it's best, well, just to have two items. Let's go ahead and go into outline and minus back the last two. Outline is very straightforward. If I come over here and select these two items and click outline, what it does is it creates an outline of them. Now let me come over here and pump up the stroke. Now notice that the color of the outline is equal to the color of the fill. Now this one might be a little bit more interesting. Let me make sure I get it all selected here. And let's pump up the stroke a couple of times. You can create an outline of a fully functional Adobe Illustrator object just by clicking that button, and the colors of the stroke emulate whatever the colors were in the fill. Now the last one right here is called minus back. And I've got over here this star that's on top. Underneath it are three items. These two over here and this one right here, dividing it right in half. So if I select it, the only thing that's going to survive is the item that's on top. But wherever they intersect, it's going to take bites out of the item on top. And if I click it, that's all I'm left with. Now in this case, I've got a circle, and I've got this red circle right next to it here. And if I go ahead and select those and click here, well, got a crescent moon. Pathfinder tools are excellent once you figure out how they work, how you have to work with them, are excellent for making more complex shapes out of and beginning with simple shapes.